Thank you for that welcome, and it is really great to be here. Interestingly, it is one of the most, what I would say, fitting sessions for me to talk about the future of competitive strategy. Cannot think of a better session than a conference that is really focused on tomorrow and the future, right? So it is really very fitting. And more than that, I think it is, you cannot underscore more or emphasize more the significance of data and digital ecosystems for our future, and of course, the whole conversation on digital transformation that has been around in this room all along, okay? So now, talking about digital transformation, I'd like you to look at this cartoon for a few seconds. And if it brings a smile on your faces, it is probably because it kind of resonates with some of your experiences. But this is something that I have experienced when I've been talking to a lot of companies during my work, which is the proclivity of people to declare any digital initiative as digital transformation. You do some cloud services, digital transformation. You do some AI somewhere, digital transformation, right? Now, why is that a problem? The problem is that we are putting so much of money on these digital initiatives, and we do not really have a way to think about the full scope of value that these technologies can provide to our business models, right? So in short, it becomes very hard to think of a strategy behind all this. And that's where I come in. I come from a competitive strategy background, and my work is essentially about framing a future for this competitive strategy that is anchored on data and digital ecosystems, right? So now, before we get to the future, let me quickly recap our current understanding of competitive strategy, okay? And there are three very important anchors to that thinking. One, all our revenues come from products, and by products I mean both physical products and services, okay? Think about it for a minute. All our revenues come from products, and I'll tell you why it's a problem very soon going on. Second, we have this big emphasis on our value chains, which is a whole bunch of interdependent activities that allow us to produce and sell. And these value chains essentially help us position ourselves, right? BI for all is different from XYZ because we manage our value chains a little differently. The way we partner with people, the way we do our R&D, with the way we do marketing, all those kinds of things. Third, most important wisdom that we have been using for the last, I would say 40 odd years, is that the industry in which you're competing is very, very important. It can amplify the value of your products, which is that in many ways, if you have a not so very great product, it can still make a lot of money. Example, Coke, Pepsi, I'm just kidding. But things that you can actually make at home with some water and some gas and some color and sugar, lots of sugar, right? That kind of product can make about, can you guess, about 70 to 80% gross margins for the last God knows how many years. Why? It's the industry in which they compete. Whereas we know so many other much more sophisticated products that suffer because the industry characteristics are not appropriate. But it's important wisdom because the way we think of competitive strategy is that if you are making money through products, think about your value chains in terms of how you position your products and marshal the forces in the industry to make it favorable for your products, right? Now, all sounds great, and we have been doing this for the last 40 years. So the question is, why do we want to change? Okay? It's going great. Why change? Well, small data point here. The last 10 years, if you look at the most valuable companies in the world, they are not these, what I call legacy firms. Legacy firms are firms that have built their legacy before the internet age. These are the legacy firms that operate through products, value chains, and industries. They are not the most valuable companies in the world. They have been replaced by you know who, okay? Now, the issue here is that these companies do not follow the same rules. For one, they don't have products necessarily, or their revenues don't come from products. Their revenue comes from data. And some of these companies, 100% of their value or revenues come from data. And now we are legacy firms, 100% of our revenues come from products. And those are the most valuable companies in the world, right? So something to think about. The second important point, we understand industries amplify the value of products. We understand that, okay? But industry structures and industry characteristics don't do anything to data. If you want to amplify the power of your data, you need something called digital ecosystems. And I know there's been a lot of conversation on ecosystems out here, but I'll give you a perspective of digital ecosystems as we go along in this talk, which is how do you use data as a competitive weapon and expand your perspective from products to data, right? So that's what my book is about. And it's focused on legacy firms, okay? I'm not going to talk about the Amazons and Googles. They have enough understanding about all this. They don't want to hear from us. But we want to understand what key principles we can take from their business models and apply it to ours, right? And what that means is how do we expand our emphasis from products to data? Products are not unimportant. They're not going away. But you don't want 100% reliance on your products. You want to start expanding that. And second, that we want to understand digital ecosystems specifically as they apply to us for our competitive strategy. Just as we understood the value of industries for our products, right? Industries were no longer a generic concept. We understood specifically what industries could do. Scale intensity, barriers to entry, buyer power, very specific things. So we want to get that specificity with our understanding of digital ecosystems as they apply to our business models, okay? So how do we go about doing that? There are three key inputs I'm going to walk through. We had a lot of conversation here about data. In fact, all the sessions were all about data. What I will try to present before you is a slightly different way of thinking about data that allows us to shift our emphasis from products to data, right? So that's what we are going to do. Second, we want to conceptualize digital ecosystems specifically for our businesses. And third, based on that, we'll think about a new framework for competitive strategy, okay? And that's what I call the future, okay? So the first input, okay? What is new about data? Data, by the way, has been around for as long as we know, okay? So, but there's something going on which is different, okay? Now, one way of looking at it is, think about this McDonald's billboard. Familiar, no? Billions and billions sold. A lot of data. And I'll come to it. This data, in many ways, is used to support the business models of products. I'm selling burgers, and the data helps me sell more burgers, understand how to sell more burgers. So much so that after 100 billion burgers in 1994, okay, they just stopped counting. Who cares? Billions and billions are sold. Okay, good. Okay. Now compare this with our friend Facebook. Okay. Now, something is different here, right? And one of the things that is different is what they know about you. Now, this is from this thing. They know, you know where I'm going with this, right? They know when a couple is likely to get married before the couple knows. You can say that about divorce too, but I won't, right? But anyway, right? So there is something different about this data. And what is this? I call it the difference between episodic data and interactive data. And the best way to describe the difference is, think about if you walked into Barnes & Noble. Remember Barnes & Noble, right? The bookstore, brick and mortar, beautiful bookstores that they had. You spend 2 hours there, okay? And in the end, you walk away with one book that you buy. What's the data they have? Somebody bought a book, maybe the title of the book, the location, which store it was sold, so on and so forth. Compare that with Amazon, okay? That you spend 2 hours on Amazon, you don't buy anything, okay? What's the data they have? Huge amount of data. What are you browsing at? What were you looking at? What you looked at more? What you looked at less? All kinds of things. That is interactive data, okay? Which is the way in which data comes streaming to you, as opposed to data that comes through discrete events. And I will talk about why interactive data is so powerful. By the way, 100% of the data of digital platforms is interactive. You cannot operate or cannot go into Uber or get any services from a digital platform without giving interactive data, okay? 100% in many cases of the data of legacy firms is episodic, okay? And really, if you push yourself and ask, we talk a lot about data, how much of it is really interactive, okay? We get data. Is it interactive? And why is this important? We think about through an example, okay? Here's, we have a physician in the midst of her, and with all, what do we say, disclosure, my wife happens to be a pediatric pulmonologist, and I got a lot of insight about this inhaler that is used for asthma. So whatever I say is right, okay? You cannot question it. Okay, so here we go. We have a regular inhaler, okay? Basically the medication, and as she would tell you, that you have an inhaler that is prescribed as doses, saying, okay, 2 puffs a day or 2 puffs twice a day, and then you have something called a rescue inhaler, right? The whole physiology in your lungs are different, and you require a different kind of medication. Then sudden attack, right? So we have that, and it's a standard inhaler, okay? Now, this inhaler is what we call a smart inhaler. Now, what's the difference? It's got a sensor, but it's now giving you interactive data. The old inhaler had a mechanical counter which kind of told you, you have 10 doses left or 30 doses left or whatever it is. But let's see what this smart inhaler does, right? What are the features of the smart inhaler? One set of features, I call them basic features, and I call them basic for a reason which I'll come to very quickly, but they're not mean features, okay? Reminders to take a medication. Why is it important? It increases compliance. Important for the patient, important for the doctor, also important for insurance companies, right? Because they don't want you to land up in the emergency room and break their budgets, right? So they are interested that you be healthy in a different way from how we understand why we want to be healthy. Tracking location. Why is that critical? Rescue inhalers. You get a sudden attack, you know where it is. Reminder to carry the inhaler with you. Again, extremely important for rescue inhalers because it could save lives, right? So, like I said, not mean features, but there are reasons why they are basic features, and I'll come to that. The second, the advanced features. Now, this is something that the inhaler companies are not yet doing, okay? But this is in the conversation, which is that I can link individual inhaler users to specific allergens. You're more likely to get an attack through pollen, you through dust, you through mold, whatever, right? Link it, and then predict an attack. Now you see the difference between McDonald's and Facebook right out here, right? This is not a McDonald's kind of data. This is far more like a Facebook kind of data because it is coming from individuals and you're understanding. Facebook may understand whether you're going to get married or not. Here they understand whether you're going to get an attack or not, right? Now why is this basic and advanced different? It's because of a very important concept which makes getting interactive data from customers very, very difficult and challenging. Basic features do not change whether it's just one person using it or a million people using it. It'll tell you the same thing. It's located here. It'll remind you. All those things are irrespective. It's like a physical product or the properties of the medication. We don't change. You get a razor with 5 blades. The 5 blades are not going to change whether just you use it or 10,000 people use it. It's the same. But you know where I'm going with this. The advanced features are directly proportional to the size of the network, which is what we call network effects. So this is a challenge for legacy firms because they are used to selling products where the product features are obvious. I'm selling you a razor with 5 blades. You can see there are 5 blades. If I'm selling you a feature saying that this is going to predict an attack, those features are non-existent when you begin. Okay? But they build over time. The digital platforms have done that. The value of an Uber was non-existent with 2 drivers and 10 riders. Right? They started coming to life because now there are millions of drivers and riders in each city. They could do it. We should also think of doing it. But the first step is to understand the difference between episodic and interactive data and how we want to use it, right? So, what is the big strategic mindset change here? Which goes back to the McDonald's example, that the old data is primarily used to support products, right? That's what we use, because all our revenues come from products. The second is where products become conduits for interactive data. Now, if you think of products in that way, then you will deal with your whole strategy in a very different way, which is your objective is not just to sell a product and forget about it. I was dealing with a company with whom I did a program and saying that how much of your business has after-sales service? Only 5%. Why? We don't know where the products are, right? Because we sell and we forget about it, right? So now there are lots of things you could do with products once you start tracking usage and interacting with customers, and it opens up a whole new set of opportunities, business opportunities for you, right? And just quickly, why is interactive data so different? Okay. First, we talked a lot about insights here, right? Even in the last session. This is a different class of insight. First, data comes from pinpointed sources, like we saw in the Facebook example, but it's true for Caterpillar, where they get data from every connected machine. Tens of thousands of machines all over the world. They are able to track how every machine is being used. Very different kind of data. It comes obviously in large volume. We talked a lot about volumes and volumes of data. This one, in some ways, this volume of data becomes usable because you can meaningfully put a lot of AI stuff into it to give immediate data-driven services, right? That is, if Caterpillar knows that your machine is idle, it can tell the customer that the machine is idle for so long and do a whole bunch of analytics, which becomes valuable in terms of generating revenue. So now you're not just generating revenue from your products, you're also generating revenue from data. And for that, these kinds of insights are critical. Rarely can you do it with episodic data insights. Yeah? And of course, rich profiles, which we all understand from digital platforms. What's wrong in getting profiles? And this is the whole concept, as Nuno was mentioning about, with the digital twins and so on and so forth. The concept is just there, right? Which is that you can track every single, and you can choose what level of specificity you want to get the insights for. Okay? The second one is a little more interesting. It's about sharing data. Now, we talked about ecosystems and all that, and healthcare, about sharing data, and we also talked a lot about problems of silos and things, and we are not kind of used to sharing data, honestly. Why is interactive data easier to share? First of all, interactive data can be used in real time, and the digital platforms have shown us that because their models rely on real-time data. If you want to connect a driver with a rider, you have to do it in real time. You cannot do it otherwise, okay? So they know that data has to be used in real time. We don't. Episodic data we rarely use in real time, right? We have that data, that Barnes & Noble generates some data, you have bought a book, but you do nothing with that data at that time. You wait, aggregate, store, after the fact insights. This one is real time. And because it's real-time data that you're using, it is inherently transient. It disappears after the real time is over. Then it becomes old data which you collect, and even the digital platforms build for using profiles and so on and so forth. So there's value to aggregated and retrospective analysis, don't get me wrong, but there's value for sharing it in real time. Let me give an example from Uber, and then I'll give an example from Caterpillar, okay? How the thing shoots. My daughter, say, waiting for an Uber ride, it's late night, unsafe neighborhood. Uber knows. It's a young girl in an unsafe neighborhood, okay, in real time. It shares that data with an app developer, comes up with an app saying she can put 3-4 names, me, my wife, a couple of her friends, and we start getting automatic texts. By the way, this is a feature. Automatic texts saying, your daughter is waiting for a ride, she got into the ride, she's in the ride, she reached there, and it becomes a safety feature. Now think about that. That real-time data has no value, right? If 3 days later you tell me, hey, your daughter took a ride at dinner, it doesn't make sense, right? So you use it in real time or you lose the value. And it has no competitive implications in any sense. Nobody can do anything with it. Think of Caterpillar. I'm an excavator, I've just finished digging. What if I shared it with a concrete pourer? What if I shared it with 10 fabricators? God forbid, what if I shared it with Komatsu? Okay, what are they going to do with it? Now, that's the difference with interactive data, because it can be used in real time, which is transient, and it can be shared. And that builds the underpinnings for digital ecosystems for legacy firms, which till now we have not really thought about in a serious way, right? And those ecosystems are different from what you're talking about, right? We are talking about general ecosystems as interdependencies across various entities, but this is about a digital ecosystem which is very similar to what these digital platforms have made a lot of money on, okay? But how do they apply to us? So, how do we envision these digital ecosystems for us? Now, definition, network of data generators and recipients, right? That is how you define digital ecosystems. And of course, they are most obvious, right, in platforms like Uber, where you have drivers and riders and a whole bunch of different app developers and so on and so forth. So we all understand that, right? So now we also know that the bigger the network, the more the data gets amplified. We understand it there. Now, the question is, what about us? What about us legacy firms? So to think about this, you start with a basic industry network understanding, okay? And here you have, on the left-hand side, the value chain, which we are all very familiar with, which is also a network, okay? But we will come to the digital network in a second. The right-hand side is more important. We call them complements. These are complements without which there is no demand for your product. That is, there's no demand for cars if there are no roads, right? There's no demand for cars if there's no petrol or gas or electricity charging or whatever it is. Most legacy firms understand complements. They are there. Light bulbs need electricity, wiring, and all that. But which legacy firm or light bulb firm can you name that is in the business of electricity or wiring or anything? We don't, right? And it doesn't make any business sense. We produce and sell. And then there are some complements that will kind of emerge. They take care of their thing, we take care of our thing, and we go our merry way, right? Now, that is changing if you look at digital ecosystems from this kind of network, and this is very relevant for most companies that we are dealing with. So let's take the left-hand side first, okay? We start in 1922 when Ford began, where there was no data. I mean, there were no computers, right? So this is a raw value chain, but still the value chain existed. Now we come in. BI for all comes in, right? And other IT companies come in and start creating a network, okay? Now, clearly, when IT services came in, they started clunky. We all know that. We all know the history that, data sharing, different legacy things. But over a period of time, these things improved with cloud services and ERP. I'm all clubbing them in that category. But the primary objective was to improve operational efficiencies, which is to automate processes and so on and so forth, and create efficiencies. Now, think about what happens with modern technologies, okay? That you not only magnify the operational efficiencies. We talked a lot about, I think we talked about smart factories or any of these kinds of things, which are where you're able to create far more efficiencies through this. We talked about AR and VR, which will, and so on and so forth, wherein you can do more things with efficiencies. In addition, you can now drive new revenue generating services because of data. Now, the GE example is known to many of us, which is the most famous example. I know GE is maligned because it didn't do well, but the concept is very important. You talked about outcome-based sales, right, in healthcare. How do you get outcome-based sales? Which is that you should, in real time, in the jet engine's case, tell the pilot how to fly the plane so that they can save on their fuel efficiencies, and you tell them, give me a percentage of that. Now you see the shift here. I'm not just making money from my jet engines. I'm making money from the data that the jet engines is generating. That needs interactive data again, right? And that is possible by modern sensors. Let's come to the other side, okay? Again, this is familiar to many of us, even 10 years back. The compliments are there, but who cares? They're there, right? Then we're already seeing this today, that things are getting connected. IoT is around. The car tells you, hey, you're running low on gas. This is the nearest gas station. I can take you there. Or you're running low on tire pressure. I can take you there, and so on and so forth. Much more interesting is how this ecosystem of this side expands as more and more and more assets get connected. And the example here is Ford. By the way, they have this feature in some of their cars that I can tell Alexa, hey, I want coffee, and Starbucks knows, the nearest Starbucks knows that I'm coming, the expected time of arrival. It keeps my choice coffee ready for me at the right temperature. I walk, I get the coffee from the store, I drive away. Everything happens in the background by magic, right? So now, of course, as more, like we say, parking spots, and also the whole concept of mobility is changing the whole auto world as we know it, right? I call this consumption ecosystems, whereas the value chain part, I call them production ecosystems. The two different things. Production ecosystems are digital ecosystems in which you produce and sell. You can use it for either efficiencies or data-driven services. Consumption ecosystems are different ecosystems because they are beyond your value chains. They are third-party entities. You're operating with them just like iOS operates with app developers, okay? And you have to operate as a platform. Now you are facilitating exchanges between various third-party entities to drive new data-driven services. And there are many examples of how companies are getting into that consumption ecosystem. Siemens has been telling me that, we were, in the long term, we were in the business of energy conservation, but they say, I'm paraphrasing this, but the cost of energy is, say, $10 a square foot. The cost of assets in a building is $100 a square foot. Cost of people in the building is $300 a square foot. Now, we are squeezing that old lemon for the $10 a square foot, which has, reached its plateau, where the whole new opportunity is in managing assets and managing people in a building, which is getting into the consumption ecosystems of the equipment that they have in the building, right? So there are ways by which now we can think about expanding scope and so on. So what do we mean by the digital ecosystems? A combination of production and consumption ecosystems, right? And based on this, we can now start thinking about a framework for competitive strategy, okay? Which is that you have your value chain and you have your products. They are your base, okay? Then it depends on how much of your value chain you're converting into a production ecosystem. And that is where A lot of opportunity comes in terms of framing what I believe BI for All can do, which is go to a client and say, we can improve efficiencies, but we can also help you design your production ecosystems to push your products into more revenue generating, data generating kind of frameworks. And of course, if the opportunity exists, connecting complements and turning them into digital platforms, which is, it gives you a whole scope. Now, all companies cannot do everything. All companies cannot do everything tomorrow, despite our tomorrow being there. But we have to wait, but it gives you a way in which you want to systematically think, okay, in terms of what you want to do with modern technologies. Remember the first slide that I said, right? The problem is unless you have an understanding of the full value of scope, you cannot have a strategy. And so, what is one way of looking at a digital strategy or a digital transformation strategy? Is I describe this as 4 tiers, 4 escalating tiers. Now, these 4 tiers, I mean, it looks as if, it's expanding funnel. Yes, the expanding funnel is about the escalating level of challenges that you go. It's not necessary that you're going to get more value out of it, right? But it tells you that you can expand your scope, at least. Now, you may still make much more money from your products, but now you can expand your scope from products to data, and you can expand your business scope, but there are challenges. So what is tier 1? So you use the example of augmented reality, virtual reality in terms for training, right, in terms of doctors. Here's an example for Ford, that they use augmented reality, virtual reality in their paint inspection. Okay, so they're replacing visual inspection with this. Now, it's interactive data coming from their assets, okay? And of course, using AI and so on and so forth, they can detect blemishes which the eye cannot, and essentially they're improving their efficiencies in quality control, okay? Tier 1. Tier 2 onwards, the big difference is that interactive data is now coming from products and users. And that's a big difference. Why? Because assets don't complain. They don't complain. You can put any number of sensors on them. You can ask them to give whatever data you want, and they'll give it to you. Okay? Try that with customers. Okay? Very different ball game. However, if you start, and there are ways by which, we talked about innovation out here. This is one thing I tell many of the companies that I work with when they tell me, but give me an example of who's doing this or who's doing that. Or, I tried this and it didn't work. And I ask them just one simple question. How much of your money, time, expertise, all your experience is built around product innovation? I'll say a lot. How much of it is built around data innovation? Right? Because we get very impatient. We'll try something and say it doesn't work. Remember, we have been a legacy firm for a reason. You have built your legacy over many years. Okay? And here we are just about scratching the surface. The other big difference is that for your product innovation, we understand strategy. We understand product strategy. We understand what markets the products have to go, what is the size of the market, who are the competitors. We understand all that. We've still not figured out the canvas in which you want to play this kind of strategy. Anyway, coming to tier 2, is you're getting data from customers, but you are not yet able to, or you cannot figure out a way by which you convert that into a data-driven service. Okay? Example, a lot of consumer packaged goods. In many ways, I think it's an irony. You're from J&J initially. When I came out of my MBA school, I won't tell you how many years back, the kings of customer data were consumer packaged goods, right? Unilevers, P&G, Colgate. These were, you wanted to be in marketing, that was the place. Today, unfortunately, they are at a big disadvantage because they don't have access to first-party data. Huge challenge for them, okay? So this is an example of P&G where diapers. You can't have sensors on diapers, right? You can't have that. So What do? They have these CRM programs. They give content on parenting. And millions of viewers come to their websites. Initially, they're anonymous, but we know clever ways by which we can start pinpointing who's who. Give a coupon, say $10 discount. Yes, give me your email ID, give me your whatever it is. Now I can track you, right? Well, track you in the sense for what? Which is that I know how many children you have, you're a new parent, or are you an expectant mother? You know a lot of that kind of stuff. You can also start knowing which media are you likely to watch an ad on, what time of the day you're likely to watch an ad on, what kind of an ad you're going to watch on, and basically they use it to improve their advertising spend efficiencies. Advanced efficiencies, because the data is now coming, pinpointed data is coming from customers. Data-driven services, we talked about GE or even Caterpillar, for example, by giving you services such as I can tell you what the idle time of your machine is, I can tell you at the end of the day where are your different assets, have they come where they are supposed to be, I can tell you which operator is safe, which operator is unsafe, and I can create gaming for you to kind of improve operator safety. I can do a lot of those kinds of things with data. Data-driven service coming from production ecosystems. They're managed through their value chains. Then, of course, the last stage is when you're getting into the consumption ecosystems, wherein you are creating a platform beyond your value chain. So Caterpillar, if they start giving services by coordinating project activities, is an example of a consumption ecosystem. Peloton, we all know, right, that is an exercise bike which is connecting users to trainers or communities of users, is an example of consumption ecosystems. So now we have a framework to think about where are we today, right? And what contingencies drive our current position. If I'm oil and gas, I should be happy with tier 1. And they're doing a great job with tier 1, right? Tremendous amount of operational efficiencies that come from huge amount of sensor data, okay? But if you can get into tier 2, you should think about tier 2. If you can get into tier 3, you should think about it. If you don't, you have two kinds of issues. One is the old problem of leaving money on the table and going away, right? There's an opportunity you never saw. And the second is competitive, which is that if others start getting into this, and start making data the bigger deal, then your product can get commoditized. So go back to the inhaler example. I may be AstraZeneca. Today I have a patent, I have a brand, I have all those things. A startup could take a generic inhaler, focus on data, and then the value of your patent is not the same. Because I might say, I don't want to go to the next level of the medication. I'd rather have these data-driven services. And there, the network effects will start killing you, because once they build it up, it's very difficult for you to catch up, right? So those are the issues that you want to think about. So how do I think about incumbents or legacy firms? There was a time when we used to be scared of these, Amazon is going to take over everything, and or Facebook or Google is going to take over everything. They are threats, okay? Don't get me wrong. They are threats to legacy firms. But we have seen now that they have tried getting into some sectors and they're walking back, right? I mean, healthcare is a classic example. The threat of digital platforms is that they live in your consumption ecosystems. And if they are able to come into your tier or your sector, that's a problem. Okay? Quick example, Alibaba, Tencent in China have taken more than 50% market share from the traditional banks because they know how you use money. Banks know how to sell money, right? And they have taken away that market share because they're much better at understanding your needs and doing that. What's the incumbency advantage? We have a base of products, value chains. We don't, unlike a platform, we don't rely purely on data-driven services. We can blend the two, but we have to think of it. On the other side, if I'm making money, I'm AstraZeneca making money out of my inhalers, why should I worry about data? Okay, is the problem. So how you bridge that is an issue. And I think I would leave you with this concept of what I call digital myopia, which is the inability to see data as a value generator and the inability to understand what your digital ecosystems are. You don't see them, you can't use them, right? So the first step is to get the necessary concepts and frameworks to understand where you are. Like I said, in ways similar to how we understand products and industries and value chains. We have proof of concept from the digital platforms. It's up to us now how we want to use it. And I'll leave it with this, with the book that goes into all this. And I think I have a couple of minutes left, but anybody wants a question or so, I'm happy to answer any question. Yes?
Sorry. So we know that we live in a very highly competitive world regarding ecosystems, and sometimes the ecosystem is built between competitors too. And we know that collaboration in that sense would be like the wow moment. How do you handle that strategically?
See, I know we have a lot of consultants here, no? Right? you know what the two famous words of consultants are, or two most popular words anyway? It depends. Right? No, it's a great question, okay? It's a great question. I would get into this situation, okay? So take Caterpillar, for example. They are not doing this, okay? They've tried doing it, but they've gone. If you want to get into the consumption ecosystem, you have to partner with Komatsu. There'll be some project sites where Komatsu might be the core driver or core platform where all other entities come and get into their platform. In some, it might be Caterpillar. In my case, Komatsu is ready to share data with me. In their case, I should be ready to share data with them. That's how the partnership comes. And we have seen that, no? We have seen that with Windows and Apple. Okay, Apple tried its very best to say, no, my operating system and my apps and all, nobody used it, right? No network effects, nobody wants to use it. Who uses OneNote? I don't know, maybe somebody does. But, right, now, I'm not saying Word or something is the best product in the world, but we all use it, okay? So they understand, okay, now Word, please come to Apple, it's okay. And the funniest thing, right, was during those days, I remember there was these ads where there were two comedians who would come on the screen, and the one fellow making fun of Microsoft. And I'm looking at these ads and saying, these people, I mean, Apple wants the more you make fun of, right, I mean, you're using my Windows in your product. You know, why are you making fun of them? But, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but it is a way in which you think about how would you want to design your play. You know, it's just like alliances, no? I mean, we know of alliances with competitors, so there's nothing wrong. But you see, the mindset of sharing data in real time is something that is alien to many legacy firms. Right?
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. So now we'll take a lunch break and return at 2:20. In the lunch break, we invite you to visit our stands, to do some network or schedule a meeting with our experts. So have a nice lunch. See you soon. Okay?